Hello there, beautiful people, beautiful family. Thanks for joining me in this part 36 of this journey that we have titled The Journey. And chapter 36 of the book Patriarchs and Prophets, which we have been studying for 36 episodes with this one. The chapter 36 is titled In the Wilderness. And this might just be the shortest conversation we will have because it's one of the shortest chapters, really. It's very short, very brief, and it goes straight to the point. And I'm just going to summarize it here super quickly. So, it might just be that we're talking for one more minute. In the last chapter, we talked about Korah, right? The rebellion of Korah. And that was right at the start of the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. And now in this chapter, as the title suggests, the Israelites are in the wilderness, and they are to be in the wilderness for 40 years. So this chapter basically summarizes the 40 years of their wander to teach two important lessons. The first one is that the Israelites were definitely not ready for freedom. When they were at the gates of the promised land, you remember what they said over and over. We wish we would slave in Egypt. We wish things were like they were. It was better for us to die in the wilderness. Egypt was so much better. They were just not ready to be independent, trusting that God was going to pave the way for them. So God sent them back to the wilderness. And then Ellen White makes this very important statement to that point that says, the wilderness wandering was not only ordained as judgment upon the rebels and murmurers. So it had a secondary lesson. It was not just to, as a judgment for those people that distrusted God, but it continues to say, but it was to serve as a discipline for the rising generation, preparatory to their entrance into the promised land. Even though they were in the wilderness, my friend, and in the wilderness, I shared this before. I have been to Jordan, I have been to Israel, I have seen the wilderness in that area close to Saudi Arabia, and it's no fun place to be. It's very desertic, rocks everywhere. It's a barren land, So here is the people of Israel wandering through these rocky mountains, dirt and sand everywhere. But God, throughout 40 years, even though it was their punishment for distrusting, it was His punishment for distrusting Him, God is guiding them. They have the tabernacle. God is leading them day and night. God is feeding them. He's protecting them. So time and time and time again, for 40 years, the people, the generation that was rising up to go into the promised land was preparing to trust God. They were being slowly nurtured and protected, and God was showing them His ways, so that when they were back at the gates of the promised land, they would move forward in faith. So that was the main lesson here, that God was teaching them a way. And then He cites this beautiful verse in Deuteronomy that says, Deuteronomy chapter 8 verses 5, 2 and 3, allowed you to hunger and fed you with manna, which you did not know, nor your fathers know, that He might make you know that man shall not live by bread alone, but man lives by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of the Lord. So it was a trusting lesson. It was to trust that the only thing that feeds the human soul is not actual food, physical food, is the spiritual food that God provides. And this verse might be very familiar to you, because if you have read the book of Matthew, the temptation of Jesus, when Satan tells Jesus, go ahead and turn the stones into bread so you eat, what does Jesus say? No, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. So Jesus is citing Deuteronomy, clearly a teaching that Jesus also studied the Bible, so as we. And then the second, Ellen White throws a bit of snippets of different stories in throughout the book of Numbers, throughout the Pentateuch books, about how God casted judgment in different scenarios because people broke his law. And this is the second and probably the only second biggest lesson that this chapter has, is that God's name is to be held in reverence. It tells a story about somebody that blasphemed against the name of God, and he was stoned. He was taken out of the camp and stoned. It talks about somebody that broke the Sabbath, and he was taken out of the camp and stoned. And then it teaches, it reverts back and throws the applications to us today. Today, we might not die. We probably won't die immediately after having broken God's commandments. But the judgment day is coming, and that is what Ellen White touches on. It says, though God may not now punish the transgression of his law with temporal penalties, yet his word declares that the wages of sin is death, and in the final execution of the judgment, it will be found that death is the portion of those who violate his sacred precepts. We talk about the law so much in this episode, in this journey that we have titled The Journey. The law is the essence of God because it is a law of love. Breaking God's law separates us from that law of love, and hence leaves us as nothing. We were created to be a loving race, in a loving relationship with God, in a loving relationship with everything that surrounds us. Everything that we see today is the result of sin and selfishness. Greed, destruction, violence, all these horrible things that happen are the result of separating from that law of love. So God is saying, Israel were taught time and again that it was important to keep his law. Again, as I've shared many times before, because God was trying to make a people, a holy nation that will be an example to the surrounding ones. In a world at the time that the surrounding ones were absolutely disastrous. Child sacrifice, polygamy, and all sorts of evil sexual acts and other things. So God wanted to create a holy people that will be an example for them. And that's it. That's the chapter. Very short chapter. Let's keep the law of God, my friends. The law of God is a law of love. When we get to know Jesus, we obey his law to the best of our abilities, not because we have to, but because we want to. And then the second lesson, as we discussed, God was preparing them to be able to enter the promised land. Thank you for joining. Take care, and until next time.